Now comes the question that, what is different about this digital age? And there are a number of things. The customers are very different. They are younger. They are a lot more demanding. The velocity is way higher. The business cycles or product cycles, whatever cycle you look at is getting crunched. The role of data is very different. Volume, velocity, variety of data is very different. The world is a lot more iterative. It's not a sequential or straight kind of straight progression. It is a lot more of a feedback loop. So there are many fundamental differences. And I think companies and leaders are not able to see that deeply. They are maybe looking at it at a very surface level.
Hello and welcome to The Brand Called You. I'm Sandeep Tyagi, your host, and today the brand is Nitin Seth. Nitin is not a new face at this show. We had talked to him in last January, where we had asked him the secret of his smile and his fantastic career to date. Quick introduction of Nitin. He was educated in IIT Delhi and IIM Lucknow. He worked in fantastic companies like McKinsey, Fidelity International, became COO at Flipkart, and now runs as CEO a company called Incedo. He's also done his own startup called Active Karma. So welcome to the show, Nitin.
Hello, Sandeep, and very nice to be talking to you again.
Yes. Today, we are talking about his new book. What inspired you to write this book?
So look, we are in the digital age. This is the mega trend of our times, and this is creating huge opportunities at all levels. It is huge opportunities to build new businesses, transform existing businesses, for entrepreneurs to leapfrog. So it's really age of abundance, age of tremendous opportunity. At the same time, what has struck me is that there is a big gap between the opportunities of the digital age and the actual reality of it. There are billions, or hundreds of billions of dollars being spent behind building digital businesses or digital transformation, which is for existing businesses. And the results from that is quite underwhelming. 70% or so of digital transformation initiatives don't realize their full impact. And that to me has always been staggering. That, wow, here's the opportunity, but the reality of it, 70% doesn't work. So that, in some sense, has been my driver. That why is this gap there, and how do you bridge this gap? And I felt I had something unique to contribute there.
Mostly coming from your experience in helping transform businesses while you were at Incedo, or from the experience you had in Flipkart, which was one of the success stories coming out of India?
Actually, way back, from my work at McKinsey, where in late 90s, I was very fortunate to be part of some of the early internet type work that happened. Then I was part of like a .com startup. So I went through the .com boom to bust. We have forgotten about it, but that was very much the early part of the digital age. And then I went back to McKinsey, where I had the great fortune of building out the knowledge center, which was really building out analytics and platform businesses for McKinsey, which was very, very, very foundational, very interesting. I go to Fidelity, where in addition to my role heading India, I was leading strategy and transformation, which was really digital transformation of a very product-centric business into a more customer-centric business. And then I go to Flipkart, which was as crazy or as vuca as you can get. So I've been very fortunate, Sandeep, that my career has coincided with the growth of the digital age and the different aspects of it. And what I felt was that when I look at what is out there in terms of content around digital, either you have futurists, either you have academicians who are writing about it, and they're writing about 20 years hence, this is how it will be, but they haven't really done it. Or you have a lot of successful entrepreneurs like Mark Benioff or Satya Nadella, others talk about it, but then they end up really talking about their company and how it's that answer to all questions. And I thought there was a space there for bringing practical perspectives together.
Yeah, indeed, indeed.
And I think that's really what I've tried to do.
And it's a sizable book, over 500 pages. You've covered a lot of material, including case studies. But you start with a framework you call the VUCA world. How is this world different? And you have some companies which are trying and wasting 70% of the money, and then there are startups which are getting off the ground with shoestring budgets and building transformational companies. What's going on?
Yeah, it's a great point, Sandeep. See, as I've tried to understand that the gap between the winners and the laggards, it's clear to me that those who are laggards aren't necessarily bad companies. These are high quality companies run by very competent management. Now, the issue is that the fundamental rules of the game are changing. And if you continue to operate with the old rules, what is going to happen is, I'll take the analogy from cricket, that if you have been trained on 5-day test matches and now suddenly, you go and play a T20, but with the same team and the same kind of orientation, you're going to be completely out of the league. That is really what is happening. Now comes the question that, what is different about this digital age? And there are a number of things. The customers are very different. They are younger. They are a lot more demanding. The velocity is way higher. The business cycles or product cycles, whatever cycle you look at is getting crunched. The role of data is very different. Volume, velocity, variety of data is very different. The world is a lot more iterative. It's not a sequential or straight kind of straight progression. It is a lot more of a feedback loop. So there are many fundamental differences, and I think companies and leaders are not able to see that deeply. They are maybe looking at it at a very surface level. And as I thought about this, I think this whole concept of VUCA, which is volatile, constantly moving, uncertain, outcomes are uncertain, complex, cause-effect relationships are not very easy to establish, and ambiguous, reality is hazy. To me, VUCA is a very good way of understanding the fundamental characteristics of the digital age. So if you kind of get this concept of VUCA, then you kind of get your head around, hey, what is this digital age about? And which I think is the necessary starting point. Whether you are a business leader leading a corporation which is looking to figure out how to play in the digital age, or you are just a young professional, I think getting your head around VUCA to me is a very helpful starting point.
And it's a very different paradigm. I mean, many of us grew up when 5-year plans were the keyword. That's how people developed their strategy and created their visions. And this is a very different way to look at the world in terms of approaching it. Now, you laid out 7 building blocks in your book, but you chose to start with customer experience. I guess my question is that really the first thing you kind of start your design of digital transformation or winning in digital transformation by starting with the customer? And maybe can you give us an example where that was the biggest difference that a company created in terms of defining customer experience, either a competitor or a transformation company?
Sure. See, digital ends up being such a complex maze, Sandeep, that it's very easy to get lost in it. Yeah. So then, whenever you have a complex kind of system type of a situation, the question is that where do you anchor yourself? Yeah, what is it? Yeah. So and to me, customer is the natural kind of starting point. Why is that? Because in the digital age, and I mentioned it briefly earlier, the customer expectations are rising tremendously. Yeah, they are rising tremendously, and whatever may be the sector, even some very traditional sectors, the expectations of experience are that of Netflix and Amazon. Yeah, and that's kind of that's how everybody is now oriented. Yeah, you add to that that there are customer has very high set of choices in the digital age. Entry barriers are low, so there is a lot more product proliferation. The choices are very high, loyalty is low, and in addition to that, with digital technology platforms, the direct to consumer channel is becoming so much easier and a lot more relevant. So whatever may be the industry, yeah, it is kind of my thesis is that all industries are headed to becoming B2C industries. Yeah, because that B2C is becoming a lot more dominant. So you add all of this, and it's very clear that customer was always king, but now customer is God. That is the starting point. And let me give you an example, and this is like somewhat of a non kind of intuitive example. That see, of course, the customer, we understand it well in traditional consumer businesses like retail or banking, but a lot of the industrial clients that I serve, and which have been very product oriented and not customer oriented, I see a very big shift happening there. So, one of my clients is this industrial cybersecurity player, and it's like been there for a while and is a dominant player in that space. Yeah, so it used to have these like on-prem solutions, move the solutions to cloud, and in their latest kind of avatar, their solutions are now on App Store. Okay, on App Store, so which is a very different paradigm, for an industrial company serving very industrial type of clients to now have, their solutions are on App Store, and that's a very different kind of mindset of how they're presenting themselves, the clients that they're looking to engage, and also then has huge implications on their product kind of design.
Yeah.
So this customer thing is sorry, it is not just kind of this retail or consumer phenomena. It is something which is fundamental, I believe, to all industries. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just struck by your example of industrial. I mean, even successful companies like Uber, which transformed how you call a cab, or other startups had redefined the experience. Is there a process that a company sits down, an existing company which has an existing customer experience, and is now looking, like your client in the cybersecurity space? Did they take the experience and put it on mobile, or did they rethink? And what would be your recommendation? Because that's a fundamental. Is this something that existing companies should aspire to, or only disruptors do that?
Yeah, my view is that existing companies have no choice but to think like a disruptor. One of the fundamental reasons for that 70% failure rate is that existing companies have been taking the existing customer offering, and the existing customer experience and putting that online, and not recognizing, not leveraging the huge power of the new medium. That to me is, if you ask one single reason for the 70% failure rate, it is this. It is taking the old paradigm, old methods from the physical world, putting it online. So they have to think afresh. Yeah. See, today a lot of the way digital gets built in a lot of the traditional companies is like a very like a least common multiple type of a process, LCM process that you take. You kind of go and search what are my competitors doing. You pick up all features and just make a long list, and add to it what you're doing, and it's like some kind of a potpourri or some kind of a mixture. Yeah, it's not, a first principles thinking is sorely lacking, and that is why startups with very little infrastructure or capital are able to build something which makes sense, because it is specific and it is addressing some specific pain points. And I think the large companies they have to do that. They have to do that, and I see a number of my clients doing that. That in telecom, one of the largest telecom players, who we work very closely, will have set up this separate brand, a challenger brand, which is a digital only brand. Now, it's still a very tiny fraction of their total business, but it's a very different thought process, which is a completely digital business. So the client kind of acquisition, delivery, service, everything is digital, and I think it's a great learning opportunity for them.
You touched upon not putting the customer experience the way it was. What about the back end, the operations? Do they need to change? And any example where, again, taking something like Uber, you could build the app, but at the back end, you could have a guy calling the taxi drivers on phone or doing it, and you just wouldn't be able to deliver the service. So the back end is equally important. And what have you seen in terms of successful strategies of taking maybe an old COBOL mainframe system and making it ready for winning? Is that even doable, or you're better off doing a challenger setup there as well?
It's a big question. It's a big question, and the answers are not easy. Yeah, I think on the customer side, I can say very very clearly that hey, you need to rethink the journey. Don't start with the existing journey and tinker that. Rethink the journey on on the back end, and the back end has two parts to it. There are the core systems, and then there are the processes. There are the operations processes. It's a much bigger battle, and in fact, just if I see it in overall perspective, over the last 10 years. A lot of the investments in digital have really been around the front-end applications and around customer experience. So by now, most businesses have a web front end and have apps and all of that. For me, the real battleground on digital is actually the core systems and operations. Over the next 10 years, my bet is that that's where most of the money will go. In fact, the order of magnitude may be 1 to 10. Yeah. For every $1 spent on front-end applications, I think the need is $10 on the core systems. Why is that? Because for too long, we have been kicking the can down the road. Yeah. For too long, the whole thought process was, okay, let us, it's a multi-tier architecture. Let's disaggregate the core systems and the front-end applications. Front-end applications, given the technology involved, was easier to work on. Yeah, and you make the investment there. So that's that's a real-time application, and it's kind of then connected with the system, which is working in batch mode. Yeah, and so how the heck do you deliver on an online promise, a real-time promise, when still a large part, your parts of the process are still in batch mode? Yeah, you look at a account opening process in a bank. Yeah. That you may go and fill out a form real time, but if you still, the whole risk assessment and everything is happening in a batch mode, you can never have the process can never really be real time. Yeah. So I think we are very much at a point where it is the core systems and it is the processes which are now the bottleneck in delivering the real time promise. And a lot of my clients, when I look at the banks, I think they are, after having dug this issue for 10, 15 years, I think they are looking at options, and both of those things are, how do we kind of transition this versus, how do we build something completely new, or we buy something new and then we kind of shift it?
1 to 10 is a good metric to kind of to put the severity and the complexity of the problem in perspective. And I guess each situation may demand something, but clearly it has to be rethought in line with customer experience, because you can't have one real time and one in batch. So that has to go hand in hand. There are a bunch of other things that an executive, a CEO, is faced with today. So many terms. You have artificial intelligence, blockchain, cloud, data analytics, a lot of things that are coming out which were not really needed to be mastered by a CEO or by a leader. But today, they are all over the place. What is your advice in the book or your own experience? How does one think of putting these new trends, maybe in some kind of a priority order? What should one tackle first, and what should one put on a watch list, but maybe it's not ready for prime time yet?
Yeah, there are a number of these technology trends or buzzwords, and I think the technology industry is very good at marketing. Yeah, so they kind of create a certain hype around each one of them. I think it's good for them, not always good for the buyer. Yeah, because as a buyer, you then may end up investing in different platforms or different aspects of the technology stack, which don't always fit together. See, the key point is, Sandeep, that it's not technology for technology's sake. It is technology finally for solving a customer problem and a business problem. Yeah. Now, for me, most of these technologies are not independent decisions. They are all connected. Yeah. So I see cloud, AI, experience, automation, data, think of them as an orchestra. Yeah. Now you have individual artists and they have to be good, but these really have to come together. Yeah, these have to come together. So that's how I think about the digital stack. These are, to me, very interconnected. And there is the notion of a virtuous cycle or a vicious cycle. Yeah. Now the starting point, often, as we discussed earlier, is the customer and the customer experience. But the main force for transformation in the stack today is cloud. Yeah, the scope and the definition of what cloud is increasing very, very rapidly, very dynamically. Every month, that almost changes. And cloud, what used to be an infrastructure capability, is now clearly the force of transformation across the data and application layers as well. So cloud program, from a technology perspective, is, I think, a good way of driving it. And and that is how you end up addressing your data and AI issues or opportunities as well. Yeah. Now, blockchain is perhaps something which is slightly different. Okay, and blockchain is a stack in itself, and blockchain is not a use case. You can say I'm doing an AI use case. Blockchain is not that specific a use case. It really has to be end to end, for the benefits of a distributed ledger to play out. So I would see cloud, AI, data, all of them as this orchestra. I would see blockchain as slightly separate. But I would definitely put blockchain also on the watch list, because it's not prime time yet for blockchain. It's one of those things that when it hits, I think it will be very, very transformative. But as far as cloud, AI, and data is concerned, this is absolutely prime time.
Lots of stuff difficult to get your mind around. So let's talk about, how does a leader deliver this? How does a leader master all this? Changing talent and attitudes is a tough problem. Even if the leaders get it, or one of the leaders get it, how do you bring along an organization? What are some of your learnings?
Yeah, see, when you think about digital transformation, and you mentioned about the seven blocks that I've tried to lay out, technology, industry changes, customers, so on and so forth. The block which, if I had to put things to scale, the building block number five, which is organization transformation, would be the largest one. Yeah, that is really the barrier. And I think on the challenge for that 70% failure rate, if one is that okay, you're just putting what you're doing onto the online world, the second biggest cause of failure is thinking of digital transformation as a technology program. Yeah.
Mhm.
Now, technology is certainly a driver of this transformation, but the bottleneck is not technology today by any stretch of imagination. Yeah. So I would say that we are perhaps only realizing 10, maybe maximum 20% of the technologies that are already there. Yeah. The bottleneck is our ability to really retool, reshape our organizations to be effective in that digital world, to move with the speed. That's one of the fundamental changes, to move with speed, to work in a more interdisciplinary fashion. Yeah, because the digital problems are not siloed functional problems, they are all customer problems. So organization change is the big issue. Now the question is, how do you make a dent there? How do you get started? See, it's too big a problem to be solved as a brute force problem. Yeah, you can't do that. It will just consume too much energy, and it will suck you out. Yeah. So the way to think about it is that how do you get a virtuous cycle going? Yeah. Have how do you do something which makes a tangible impact, a positive impact to something which is visible and important for the organization, and that kind of then gets more. That starts a virtuous cycle. So you have to think of it as a virtuous cycle, and then towards that, I kind of have this construct of a two-speed execution approach, that you have to work on multiple speed. There is a speed one, which is quick wins, very specific targeted problems which you can solve. Yeah. And you focus on speed one, get some positive traction, and then along with that there is a speed two, which is kind of the bigger picture, which you also you're also working on along with speed one. But it's not a brute force problem. It's it is how you trigger the virtuous cycle.
This two-speed concept is an interesting one. I remember reading through and I enjoyed the examples and the idea that you gave there. I think it creates a kind of a quick win as well as a deep transformation pace to it, which I think can have an impact. What's the role of partners? A lot of companies have experience in hiring external partners, and maybe a lot of that 70% that you talked about ends up going to some of that effort. How do you effectively do this transformation using partners, and what's a smart way of doing it?
Yeah, see, we are in a world, Sandeep, that no company can do it alone. Yeah, it's too complex a world. It's moving too fast. Yeah, and I also see it at a philosophical level, that both at an individual level and at a enterprise level, that it really brings home that we're not islands. We are all highly interdependent and kind of interconnected. Because so look, building that ecosystem, where you're able to access ideas, talent, capabilities, IP from multiple sources is very necessary to be able to move with the right speed, and to be able to also have a worldview of what is happening and what do I do. Yeah. So there is no question that you have to build a partner ecosystem, whoever you are, whether you're an enterprise like a bank or a telco or whoever, or even for me, like, as a, I run a technology company, I need to have partners. Yeah. So nobody can do it alone. Now, how do you think about a partner strategy? See, my view is that, look, the needs are very different. The needs are very different, and you have to be very clear what you need, and then have fit for purpose partners for that. Yeah. So I think, for especially for the larger companies, I think it's clearly moving away from, hey, I have one partner and this partner will solve all of my needs, to lot more of a segmentation. So some of the big corporations that I serve, I see this, that they have some large services companies that they partner with, on some of their legacy modernization needs. Then they work with more specialized digital analytics companies like mine, for more specific transformational type of needs. Then they work with a number of platform players, and that's a big shift from before, from build it, yourself, to more consume and buying technology. Yeah. So I think that is really what I see, that a lot more of specialization in the partner ecosystem, and the corporate and the enterprises having a lot more segmenting, and being very clear about what they're expecting from specific partners.
Okay. So let's change gears to a little bit more on the personal aspect of this. What leadership traits have you personally found to be most useful in adapting to this winning in the digital age? What about your own personality have you worked on over time that has made you more adept at this over time?
Yeah. So look, earlier, when we were talking about the execution approach, we talked about two speed. Yeah. And I'll build on that. We are in a world, this VUCA world, which is full of paradoxes. Yeah. And as a leader, you need to master these paradoxes at the same time. You don't have a choice. It is both growth and profitability. It is short term, long term. It is customers, employees. It's and machine. I can keep going on. This notion of mastering duality, I believe, is one of the most important leadership challenges and opportunities for the digital age. Yeah, this is what has been my reflection, is very different. Is something which I had not really thought a lot about earlier, but over the last couple of years, I think it started, with my time at Flipkart, when I was really, that was as VUCA as you get. And then last 3-4 years of leading Incedo, I think this notion of, we are in a world of paradoxes, you have to accept it. And in those seemingly contradictory or conflicting set of objectives, that how do you optimize both, not trade-offs, but how do you optimize both? I think that is the great leadership opportunity for this digital age.
Finally, I know you have college kids, so do I. For young professionals, people who were born in the digital age, who are not afraid of using technology, is there something for them that you would advise on how do they succeed in this age, which to them doesn't seem that different, but still, from your perspective, maybe some old world wisdom that a digital age native needs to learn. What is your advice for digital age native?
Yeah, I feel so excited for them. I wish I was 30 years younger. This is. So I'll make 2 points here, Sandeep. First is that, look, this is digital age, is the age of abundance. Yeah, is the age of opportunity. When you and I were growing up, it was still, age of scarcity. The options were become an engineer, become a doctor, right? At least growing up in India. This is the age of abundance, and I think that should really liberate, every young person today to find their own passion and their own path. And the best way of doing that is to be an entrepreneur. It should really, that's a big encouragement. That's the opportunity. And being an entrepreneur is not just about doing a startup, though that's a very big part of it. Even if you are doing a job, you need to be an entrepreneur. And what is being an entrepreneur? Being an entrepreneur is about creating something, and to create something, you have to take risks. Right? Those are the two fundamental elements of that. So that's what I would just say, that hey, go and be an entrepreneur. Because it's the age of abundance. It's the entry barriers are generally low, capital is available. Go out, have fun, explore the world, and even if you fail, the downside, is not that high. So that's kind of advice number one. The advice number two really is that in a world which is changing so rapidly, think about things that don't change. Yeah. So it's a very important construct to my mind. A lot of change. So what is it that is not going to change? And those are skills that one should really focus on. And there are many things I can talk about, but I'll call out two things. First is problem solving. The ability to look at any complex problem and being able to zone it down on, okay, here is the core issue to be solved. That is never going to go out of fashion. In fact, in this crazy VUCA world, that's even more important than before. So build outstanding problem solving skills. Yeah? And the second thing is developing this human empathy. Developing the human empathy of being able to connect with the other person and being able to put yourself in the other person's shoes, seeing things from other person's perspective. And that is really fundamental to leadership, that is fundamental to communication. Yeah. So that would be my second advice, problem solving and empathy. These will never go out of fashion.
Thank you, Nitin. The time has passed quickly. In the digital age, that's what happens. We are at the end. Thank you so much for sharing. You have the book, The Winning in the Digital Age. Yeah. Guys, please go ahead, learn from the guy who has done it all, for large companies, startup becoming big company, strategy consultant. And it's packed with case studies, and I've read it and enjoyed it. So thank you so much for coming on the show. Nitin, it was so good to have you.
Thanks, Sandeep. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.